If Officer Morgan had walked out of that room just 5 seconds earlier, no one would have ever heard Hunter bark. And if Hunter hadn't barked, well, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's how it started. Not with a missing child alert, not with a break-in or a call for backup. Just a bark, loud, sharp, echoing through a painted nursery room filled with stuffed animals and soft sunlight. The kind of bark that doesn't come from play. The kind that means danger, even if no one else in the room could see it yet. It was day 6 of Camp Maple Hollow's summer program, nestled deep in the woodlands of northern Pennsylvania. The place looked like something out of a brochure. Fresh-cut fields, marshmallow bonfires, hand-painted signs with smiley faces, and a dozen cabins tucked under tall pines. Parents paid good money to send their kids here for 2 weeks of screen-free, nature-loving fun. Officer Morgan Chase wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. He was just doing a walkthrough at the request of the sheriff's department. Small-town PR move, let the kids pet the canine, remind them the police are the good guys, that kind of thing. Morgan didn't mind. He liked kids, and he trusted Hunter more than most people. The German Shepherd had been with him through 4 drug busts, 2 arson scenes, and 1 near-fatal warehouse ambush. Hunter didn't wag his tail unless it meant something. He didn't bark without a damn good reason. So when the dog suddenly froze in the doorway of the camp's nursery room, hackles raised, growling low at the pile of teddy bears in the corner, Morgan knew. Something was wrong. "Easy boy," Morgan said, but his voice was tight. He unclipped Hunter's leash, letting the dog step forward on his own. The room was painted a soft baby blue, probably used for nap time and rainy day crafts. There was a small shelf of storybooks, a handful of bean bags, and a mountain of stuffed animals. Soft browns, pinks, and creams, all jumbled together in a plastic bin. Innocent, safe. Except Hunter didn't think so. He stepped slowly toward the bin, shoulders squared, tail stiff. Then he stopped, crouched low, and let out a single explosive bark, so loud the room shook. Morgan's hand instinctively went to his sidearm. Camp Director Laura Bennett rushed in, smiling politely. "Everything okay, officer?" Morgan's eyes didn't leave the dog. "Where'd you get the stuffed animals?" "Oh, those? Donations," she said casually. "A volunteer brought them last week. Mr. Something. Buddy, I think. Real sweet guy. Said he installs comfort toys at local shelters and camps, especially after the pandemic." Morgan's jaw tightened. "That so?" Laura raised an eyebrow. "You think there's something wrong with the toys?" Hunter barked again, twice this time, and started pawing at the base of the pile. It wasn't the toys, not really. It was what was underneath them. Morgan knelt down and began carefully moving the stuffed animals aside. Something didn't sit right. One of the bears, larger than the others, had glass eyes that didn't reflect the light like the others did. When he picked it up, it was heavier, almost rigid inside. But before he could inspect it, Hunter growled and nudged his nose toward the floorboards beneath the bin. Morgan tapped the floor. Hollow. He looked up at Laura. "This room have a crawl space?" Laura shook her head. "Not that I know of. It's built on slab." He pushed the toy bin aside and got to work with his multi-tool. A few pried boards later, he found a shallow compartment carved into the floor, no more than 3 inches deep, hidden perfectly beneath the foam matting and nursery paint. Inside, there was a soft velvet cloth, and beneath that, a small black object, no bigger than a matchbox, with a blinking green light. Morgan's stomach dropped. A camera. By the time the tech team from the department arrived, Laura had already pulled all the children from the building and begun dialing every parent on the list. She was frantic. She swore up and down she had no idea, that no one on staff had installed anything, that the bears had just been a nice gesture. Morgan believed her, but it didn't matter. Someone had access to that room. Someone who knew exactly how to hide in plain sight. And Hunter had sniffed them out. At the station, the forensics unit cracked open the modified stuffed bear Morgan had carried out. Inside was a micro HD camera, wired cleanly and disguised within the polyester stuffing. The lens had been inserted behind one of the glass eyes, giving it a full panoramic view of the nursery. The setup was sophisticated, way beyond some amateur prank. And worse, the footage didn't just stream locally. It uploaded to an encrypted server somewhere else. Someone had been watching, recording, for days. "What kind of sick freak?" Morgan muttered as the first few clips loaded onto the department's monitor. The footage wasn't graphic, not in the way most people would expect, but that made it worse. It showed the children playing, reading books, napping, dressing for swimming lessons, picking their noses, whispering secrets, completely unaware, completely unprotected. And in the margins of that footage, barely noticeable, were time gaps. Certain kids stopped appearing in later footage, their names lined up with a few early pickup records. Parents who'd been told their kids had a family emergency or got homesick and went home early. But there were no photos, no goodbyes, no confirmations. That night, as Morgan drove home, Hunter sat silent in the back seat. His eyes were alert, fixed on the road ahead. "You knew," Morgan said aloud, glancing at the mirror. "You knew before I did." The dog didn't respond, of course, but he didn't have to. Because for the first time in his career, Morgan wasn't chasing a suspect after the fact. Hunter had stopped it before it got worse, or at least that's what Morgan hoped. But deep down, he had a gut feeling. This wasn't over, not even close. The sun had barely come up over Elk County when Officer Morgan Chase walked back into Camp Maple Hollow. A thin fog clung to the treetops. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically on a pine trunk. The campgrounds, usually bursting with morning songs and bouncing footsteps, were dead quiet. Too quiet. Children had been relocated to the main lodge, kept busy with emergency crafts and supervised play. Most of them didn't know what was going on. A few had overheard enough to be scared, but all of them kept asking the same thing. "Why can't we go back to the nursery?" Morgan didn't have the heart to answer. Not yet." Hunter stepped out of the cruiser with a low grunt, tail level, nose twitching. His paws crunched softly against the gravel as he trotted to the edge of the porch where the nursery door stood slightly ajar. "Go on, partner," Morgan murmured. The German shepherd padded inside, scanning with every sense. His ears flicked forward, his breathing sharpened. He made a slow circle around the room before stopping in the exact same corner where the stuffed animal bin had been. Then, just like yesterday, he sat, body tight, head cocked, and stared at the floor. "Still not done here, huh?" Morgan asked under his breath. He dropped to one knee, flashlight in hand, and rechecked the floorboards. They'd already pulled the hidden camera and scoured the crawl space. There were no wires left, no second compartment. But Hunter's stare said there was something else, something they missed. Camp Director Laura Bennett stepped lightly into the room behind him, holding a clipboard to her chest. I looked into the volunteer file you asked about. The man who brought the stuffed animals," she said. Morgan stood. "What did you find?" Laura's face twisted with confusion. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "No background check. No full name. Just a paper form with a first name and a phone number that doesn't connect anymore. He signed in as Buddy. That's all we have. No driver's license copy, no insurance waiver, nothing." Morgan exhaled slowly through his nose. "How'd you let someone like that in here?" "He came with a recommendation from the church group that did the picnic. We've had traveling volunteers before, storytellers, puppeteers, even therapy clowns. It's not unusual." "Was he alone?" Laura hesitated. "Yes, friendly, charming. The kids liked him. Honestly, he was calming. Said he wanted to give back after losing his nephew in a house fire." Morgan's brow furrowed. "Did anyone verify that story?" "No," she admitted. "We didn't think we had to." Hunter let out a low, rumbling growl. Back at the precinct, Morgan dropped the so-called volunteer application onto the desk of Deputy Rivas, their in-house tech specialist. "Run this. Look for handwriting matches, ink composition, pressure, anything. I want to know who this guy is and where he's been." Rivas tilted his head. "You think this was a one-time setup?" Morgan shook his head. "I think this guy's been doing it a while, and I don't think he's working alone." He paused. "And I think we're behind." That night, Morgan stared at the footage again. The microcam hidden inside the stuffed bear had recorded at least 72 hours of material, all saved to a cloud server through a Wi-Fi hotspot hidden in the wall. The footage showed what any parent might expect from a nursery: naps, playtime, giggles, scribbled crayon drawings. But there was something off in how it was recorded. Whoever installed this, they weren't looking for anything in particular, Morgan whispered to himself. They were just watching, waiting. But then a pattern started to emerge. Every time a certain child left the room, the video jumped. Not a glitch, an intentional cut. And those children? The ones whose video clips were deleted midstream? They were the same ones listed as early pickups. 3 so far, all supposedly picked up by relatives. None of the parents were on record as coming early. Morgan called the first family on the list. "Hi, Mrs. Green. This is Officer Morgan Chase with the Elk County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about your son, Emmett. There was a pause, a too long pause. Is this about the camp refund? She asked. Morgan's stomach clenched. No, ma'am. What refund? She sighed. They told us Emmett got homesick and needed to leave early. We paid for 2 weeks, but he was only there 4 days. They promised a refund. He didn't come home? No, they said they were transferring him to a nearby camp with more one-on-one support, that we get an update. But the new camp never called. I've been trying to reach someone for 3 days. Morgan went cold. Ma'am, Emmett's not at any other camp. There was a long silence. And then she screamed. That same night, Hunter jolted awake from his bed on the porch, ears rigid. Morgan sat up from the couch, reaching instinctively for his gun. Hunter? The dog was already at the front door barking, sharp, relentless. Morgan pulled the door open, stepping onto the porch with his weapon drawn. No one was there, just a white envelope tucked between the door slats. He opened it slowly. Inside was a Polaroid photo of the nursery room from camp, taken from a different angle than the hidden camera had shown. In the photo, 3 children sat reading. A figure stood in the far background, partially cut off. A tall man with a wide smile and a puppet in his hand. Morgan flipped the photo over. One word was scribbled on the back. More. By morning, Camp Maple Hollow was shut down. No more campfires, no more sing-alongs, no more teddy bears. Morgan stood beside the playground with Hunter, watching as deputies sealed off the nursery building with crime scene tape. Photographers snapped images, texts ran luminol on the floorboards, and counselors stood nearby, stunned into silence. The press would get wind of this soon, and when they did, it would spiral fast. But Morgan didn't care about headlines. He cared about Emmett Green and the other 2 kids still unaccounted for. Hunter barked sharply, interrupting his thoughts. He was nose to ground now, trailing something behind the arts and crafts cabin. Morgan followed him slowly. That's when they found it, another bear, lying face down in the dirt, half buried beneath pine needles and leaves. But this one was different. It had no electronics inside, just a voice box. Morgan pressed the belly. It squeaked, then spoke. Shh, we don't tell secrets in the forest. The day after they shut down Camp Maple Hollow, Officer Morgan Chase sat alone in his squad car, parked at the edge of the camp's gravel entrance road. A fine rain had begun to fall, soft, steady, and oddly soothing. But inside, his mind was anything but calm. In his hands was the photograph, the Polaroid someone had left on his porch, showing a grainy image of 3 children in the nursery with a man in the background. That smile still haunted him. Too wide, too calm. And the puppet in the man's hand, it looked homemade, rough stitching, no eyes, just a lopsided mouth. Hunter sat in the back seat, silent but watchful. His ears twitched every time Morgan's grip tightened on the photo. We're not dealing with a tech creep, Morgan muttered. This guy's a showman. Deputy Rivas had spent the morning running the photo through every facial recognition software they had access to. State databases, FBI archives, even older missing persons bulletins. Nothing. Either the guy's a ghost, Rivas said over the phone, or he's damn good at hiding. Morgan stared through the windshield at the now empty camp sign. Someone had tied a pink balloon to it, probably left over from last week's birthday party. It bobbed weakly in the rain. I don't think he's hiding, Morgan said. I think he wants to be seen. Just not by us. Morgan spent the rest of the day doing old-school legwork. He drove to every local church and community center in a 30-mile radius, asking about a man named Mr. Buddy or someone distributing teddy bears. At the 3rd stop, a small Baptist church in the neighboring town of Rock Hollow, a janitor remembered something. Oh yeah, the man said, squinting. We had a fella like that show up at our fall fair. Had a puppet show for the kids. Handed out stuffed toys. Said he used to be a teacher. Did he give a name? Went by Buddy. Might have been short for something else, I don't know. He gave out these weird paper tags with inspirational quotes on them. Morgan perked up. Do you still have one? The janitor scratched his head. Actually, yeah. He led Morgan to a supply drawer and handed him a weathered cardboard tag, the kind you might see tied to a boutique candle. The quote read, "Every child is a story waiting to be told. The trick is knowing when to turn the page." On the back, in faded blue ink, was a crude sketch of a bear's face with X's for eyes. That night, Morgan sat at his kitchen table with a bottle of black coffee and a stack of papers. Every note, every interview, every strange inconsistency. A corkboard behind him had photos of the missing kids, time-stamped screenshots from the hidden nursery cam, and a list of camps within a 100-mile radius. Hunter lay nearby but not asleep. His eyes stayed on the window. Then he rose suddenly, walked to the photo board and sat, staring directly at the blurry image of the man in the puppet photo. Morgan turned. "You keep going back to him, huh?" He walked over and pinned the paper quote tag beside the image. "Let's find out what story he's trying to tell." The next morning, Morgan met with the parents of Emmett Green, the missing boy who had supposedly been transferred from Maple Hollow to another camp. They were now frantic, barely holding themselves together. "He's scared of the dark," Mrs. Green whispered, clutching a worn Batman action figure. "He has night terrors. You don't think he ran away, do you?" "No," Morgan said firmly, "I don't." "But the camp said—" "I don't believe the camp knew what was happening either. I think someone created a lie and slipped out while everyone else was still following protocol." "Do you think he's alive?" Morgan looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I think we're going to find him." Later that afternoon, Morgan received a call from a retired officer he'd once trained under. "You said you were looking into a guy handing out bears at summer camps." "Yeah. You ever hear of the Comfort Wagon Project?" Morgan blinked. "Sounds familiar." "It was a traveling charity gig about 10 years back. Van full of toys, therapy puppets, clown noses, the works. Visited children's hospitals, camps, shelters. It got shut down after one of the volunteers was caught installing cameras in a hospital playroom." Morgan's blood ran cold. "You have a name?" "Nope. The guy vanished before they could arrest him. Feds think he had help, changed his identity, but they never recovered the hard drives." "Was he called Buddy back then?" "Went by Uncle Bear, creepy bastard." Morgan felt the air leave his lungs. He looked across the room at Hunter, who was now staring at the front door again, ears forward. They returned to Camp Maple Hollow before sunset. Not the nursery. This time, the crafts cabin. Hunter had followed something there earlier, but hadn't barked. Morgan trusted his instinct. Sometimes the absence of sound meant more than noise. Inside the cabin, everything was as it had been. Paper plate masks, glitter, broken crayons. But behind the cupboard under the sink, they found a loose floor panel. Morgan pried it up and found a duffel bag. Inside were 3 unused teddy bears, each with different stitching on the paws. A small voice recorder, out of batteries. A sealed envelope marked, "To the next storyteller," and a map with 6 camps circled in red. 2 had already hosted the Puppet Man. 4 hadn't yet. Morgan turned to Hunter. "We're not chasing a man anymore." Hunter stared up at him. "We're chasing a ritual." Back at the station, Morgan opened the envelope. The letter inside was handwritten, in looping cursive. "The world forgets what it cannot feel, but children feel everything. That's why we keep them close. The others don't understand, but we do. Don't let the story end before it's ready." "Let that be." Morgan's chest tightened, not just because of the words, but because something was scrawled in the corner. A small sketch of a hand puppet, and beneath it, a date, July 3rd. That was 4 days away, and it was circled on the map, Camp Timber Run, 2 towns over. The next morning, Morgan briefed the sheriff and called in a favor from the state police. "If we let this guy vanish again, we won't get another shot." "We don't even know what he looks like," the sheriff replied. "I've got someone who does," Morgan said. He looked down at Hunter. Camp Timber Run didn't look like a place where darkness could live. Nestled beside a pristine lake, with rows of rustic log cabins, in a sprawling main lodge draped in red, white, and blue bunting for the upcoming 4th of July celebration, it had the perfect postcard charm. Children played tag between trees, counselors hollered directions for canoe practice, and music from a Bluetooth speaker drifted lazily through the air. But Officer Morgan Chase didn't trust charm anymore. Neither did Hunter. The German Shepherd stayed close to Morgan's leg as they stepped out of the cruiser. His nose twitched the moment his paws hit the gravel. His ears rotated slowly, scanning. The time was July 2nd, just 1 day before the date scrawled in the Predator's cryptic note. "Appreciate you coming out," said Camp Director Jim Halston, a stocky, sunburned man in his late 40s with a permanent whistle around his neck. "Is this about the alert we got from the sheriff's office yesterday?" "It is," Morgan nodded. "I'm not here to shut anything down. I just need to make sure nobody's come through here posing as a volunteer or entertainer." Jim furrowed his brow. "We've had plenty of visitors lately. 4th of July week's our busiest. Musicians, storytellers, face painters. All vetted, I thought. Any of them come alone? Bring toys for the kids?" Jim scratched his chin. "There was a guy last week. Had a puppet show. Called himself Buddy Bear. The kids loved him." Hunter growled low. Morgan's heart sank. "You still have him on the schedule?" "No, he said he might stop back for the fireworks tomorrow. Wasn't officially booked." Morgan nodded once. I need access to your guest logs, any photos, and the exact layout of your buildings. Jim stiffened. Is this guy dangerous? Morgan looked him dead in the eye. If I'm right, you've got less than 24 hours before someone tries to take a child from this camp. They set up quietly. Morgan coordinated with state police to place 2 plainclothes officers near the front gate and 2 more in the woods by the lakeside trail. They brought in an unmarked surveillance van with camera equipment aimed toward the activity center where most kids would be gathered for evening movie night. But Morgan wasn't interested in just surveillance. He was hunting. Hunter stayed close, trailing every inch of the art cabin, mess hall, and the bunkhouses. At one point, he stopped near a maintenance shed behind the firewood pile, barked once, then went silent. Morgan pried the lock open. Inside were gardening tools, fire starter kits, and an old suitcase shoved into the far corner, half hidden behind tarps. He opened it slowly. Inside, 6 brand new teddy bears. No tags. Same stitching style as the ones recovered at Camp Maple Hollow. Tucked beneath them, wrapped in flannel, a mask, fabric, hand-stitched, with 2 black buttons for eyes. Morgan returned to the surveillance van with the mask in hand. One of the state officers, Ramirez, stared at it. Whoever he is, he's planning something theatrical, she said. This isn't just about abduction. He wants to be remembered. Morgan nodded grimly. He doesn't just want to take them, he wants to leave a message. At 8:13 p.m., just as the movie night began and the children were gathering under the outdoor projector, Hunter tensed. His ears flattened, and his head swiveled sharply toward the tree line past the craft shed. Morgan followed his line of sight. A man in a floppy bucket hat and khaki vest stood near the edge of the trees, half in shadow, holding something under his arm. A puppet. Morgan spoke into his radio. Eyes on possible suspect, male, near northeast tree line. The man didn't move. He just watched the children. His head tilted ever so slightly, like he was analyzing the rhythm of their laughter. Morgan stepped forward. The man turned and ran. The next 10 seconds were chaos. Morgan sprinted after him, Hunter at his side, leash unclipped. The man darted through the trees, weaving between tents and climbing gear. Camp staff shouted in confusion. Flashlights flicked on, and one of the state officers called for backup. Hunter bolted ahead. The man tossed the puppet to the ground and cut left toward the lake trail. Morgan was 10 paces behind, adrenaline surging. Hunter, take him! The canine barked once, then leapt. They tackled him by the dock. Hunter slammed into the man's side, teeth gripping fabric, dragging him down hard into the dirt. Morgan reached them seconds later, pinning the man's arms and yanking the mask from his vest. But when he looked at the suspect's face, he froze. It wasn't him. It was a young man, maybe mid-20s, pale, shaking. Well, wait, the man stammered. I'm just an actor. He paid me to wear the hat and carry the puppet. Morgan cuffed him fast. Who is he? Where is he? The man sobbed. I don't know, I swear. He found me online, said it was a social experiment. Morgan turned to Hunter, who was still facing the woods, still growling, still alert. And that's when Morgan saw it. Another figure, just for a second, standing behind the trees. Taller, thinner, holding a Polaroid camera. Click, then gone. They swept the camp that night, every trail, every building. Drones flew over the lake and thermal imaging scanned the woods. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No children missing. But something had been left behind. Back at the dock, where the actor had been tackled, officers found a small object stuck in the mud. Another voice recorder. Morgan pressed play. You're clever, Officer Chase, but this isn't your story to end. It's just the second act. See you in the finale. They called off the campfire for the 4th of July. Parents were notified. Camp Timber Run would be closing early, citing security concerns. No one protested. Too many had seen the commotion. Too many had heard the barking. Back at the precinct, Morgan sat with Hunter by his side. On the table between them, the stitched mask, the 6 bears, the recorder, and the new Polaroid taken that night. The photo showed the same angle of the children watching the movie, only this time the camera had been held higher. And in the bottom corner of the frame, a note scrawled in black marker. Next, the carnival. Morgan opened the map from the duffel bag again. He'd missed it before. A faded scribble beneath one of the red circles. Children's Summer Carnival, July 9th, Pine Creek Fairgrounds. 7 days away. Hunter placed one paw on the map, right on the circle. The Pine Creek Fairgrounds had always been the pride of the county. Every summer, the traveling carnival rolled in like clockwork. Colorful trailers, flashing lights, fried food, and the unmistakable scent of cotton candy floating through the warm July air. Parents brought their kids in droves. Teenagers wandered hand in hand past the tilt-a-whirl. Seniors played bingo in the shaded pavilion. It was loud, bright, nostalgic, and the perfect place for someone to disappear without anyone noticing. Officer Morgan Chase stood near the carousel watching the crowd. Hunter sat by his side, panting lightly in the summer heat, his golden brown fur catching flecks of evening light. His eyes weren't on the rides, though. They were on the people. Scanning, always scanning. It had been 4 days since the failed trap at Camp Timber Run. 4 days since they chased a decoy through the woods, only to have the real predator photograph the chaos from the shadows. Now they were racing time, and the carnival was packed. "Security's light," Morgan muttered into his radio. One off-duty deputy at the ticket booth, a couple of retirees near the lost child tent. "That's it." Ramirez's voice crackled in his earpiece. "We've got 4 plainclothes units walking the grounds. You sure this is the place?" Morgan nodded toward the map in his back pocket. He marked it, July 9th. That's tonight. "And the puppet guy?" "Not seen yet, but he always shows his face." Morgan looked down at Hunter, who was now stiffening, head turned sharply toward the old funhouse on the far end of the fairgrounds. "You feel that too, don't you, boy?" Hunter didn't move, didn't blink. The funhouse was a 2-story portable structure, painted in faded reds and yellows, with chipped mirrors and flickering bulbs that spelled out Laugh Palace. It hadn't been renovated in decades, the kind of place designed to entertain little kids but forgotten in time. Morgan made his way across the grass, keeping his hand near his holster. Hunter trotted ahead, stopping at the threshold. Then he growled, low, deep, guttural. Morgan reached the door and pushed it open. The inside was dimly lit, the walls lined with mirrors and strange squeaky flooring. Laughter recordings played on a loop, warped with age. But something else played too. Music, faint, a child's music box tune, barely audible under the noise. Morgan moved through the hall, flashlight in one hand, gun drawn in the other. "Hunter," he whispered, "find it." The canine took off, through mirrors, up crooked stairs, past cardboard clowns and plastic skeletons, until he stopped at a black curtain. Morgan joined him and pulled it aside. Behind it sat a single chair. On the chair, a teddy bear. Stitched into its chest, a tiny speaker. Morgan pressed it. The bear laughed. Then it spoke. "Some bears are stuffed with a fluff. Others are filled with secrets." Morgan's spine prickled. He turned the bear over and found a slot for a memory card. Back in the surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, Morgan and Ramirez examined the bear's speaker and cracked open the memory card. Dozens of short video files, each one labeled by child's first name, some dated as far back as 2018. Ramirez's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "This guy's been at this for years." Morgan leaned forward, jaw tight. "Play one." A video loaded. It showed a child's bedroom, dim lighting, soft music in the background. A little girl stood near a wall, singing to a teddy bear. A voice off screen said, "Show me your favorite toy again." The girl pointed, "This one." The video cut out. Morgan sat back, fists clenched. "I want facial scans of that voice. Timestamp analysis. Get the metadata." Ramirez nodded, already typing. Hunter barked softly, ears perked. A second later, Morgan's phone buzzed. Text message from one of the plainclothes officers. "Possible match. Man with hand puppet near petting zoo." Morgan and Hunter were already running. By the time they reached the petting zoo, the crowd had thinned. A few kids tossed pellets into the goat pen. A bored teenager in a staff shirt scrolled through his phone. And standing near the fence, a man, tall, slender, wearing a sun hat and denim overalls. In his left hand, a puppet shaped like a bear with X's for eyes. Morgan slowed, breathing hard. He tapped his earpiece. Target visual confirmed. Then he called out loud, "Sir, I need a word with you." The man turned, smiled, and ran. The chase tore through the fairgrounds, past the corn dog stand, across the games alley, into the shadows of the Ferris wheel. Carnival goers screamed as Hunter lunged forward, dodging legs and leashes. Morgan sprinted behind him, shouting into his radio, "Eastbound, near the dunk tank." The man ducked into the mirror maze attraction, a perfect place to disappear. Morgan followed. Glass, reflections, twisting corridors. Hunter barked furiously, nose to the ground, weaving between panels. Morgan pushed through and then stopped. At the center of the maze, in front of a full mirror, stood the man. Still smiling, still holding the puppet. "Don't come any closer," Morgan said. The man tilted his head. "Officer Chase, I was hoping we'd meet like this. Where are the kids?" The man just chuckled. "You keep looking at the mirrors, but never behind them." Morgan stepped forward, hands where I can see them. But the man didn't move. Instead, he reached inside the puppet and pulled out a small remote. "Don't," Morgan warned, but it was too late. The man pressed the button. A speaker, somewhere in the maze, began to play static. and then a recording. A child's voice. "Help me!" Morgan's blood went cold. Hunter snarled and lunged, but the man took off again, slamming into a mirror panel and shattering it into 100 pieces. He vanished into the chaos. By the time they exited the maze, he was gone. Vanished again, like smoke. But this time he'd left a breadcrumb, a folded brochure for a traveling children's theater company. And inside, circled in red ink, next performance, July 15th, Elk River Community Theater. Back at the precinct, Morgan and Ramirez studied the brochure. "This guy's a performer," she said. "He's staging this like an act. He wants to be pursued." Morgan nodded slowly. "He's playing a part, but we're not just his audience anymore." He glanced at Hunter. "We're the ones he didn't count on." Hunter growled softly in agreement. Later that night, Morgan opened a new envelope that had been slipped under his windshield back at the fairgrounds. Inside, another Polaroid. This one showed a grainy shot of Morgan himself standing outside the funhouse unaware. Scrawled on the bottom, "The finale is closer than you think. 3 days." That's how long Officer Morgan Chase had until the date marked on the brochure, July 15th, Elk River Community Theater. But time wasn't the only thing slipping through his fingers. The predator was changing tactics, getting bolder, and more personal. The first sign came the morning after the carnival. Morgan had barely poured his first cup of coffee when a knock came at the precinct door. It was a courier. Courier, late 20s ponytail, company shirt, friendly enough. "Package for Officer Chase," he said, holding out a cardboard box. "No return address. Just says urgent." Morgan took the box, thanked him, and brought it inside. Inside the box, a single teddy bear, identical in stitching to the others. A voice recorder, and a plastic name badge from the Elk River Community Theater labeled "Backstage Pass, Volunteer Coordinator Buddy." Morgan pressed play on the recorder. "You've followed the footprints. Good boy, but you forgot to ask the most important question. Who's watching you?" There was a pause, then a sound that made Morgan's heart stop. The squeaky voice of a young child whispering, "Morgan." Another pause. Then, "I saw you in the mirror." Morgan set the recorder down slowly, his fingers cold. Hunter stood beside him, alert and tense, eyes fixed on the window. That afternoon, Morgan and Deputy Ramirez scoured every inch of the Elk River Community Theater's public records. The building had been built in the 1960s, hosted local productions, talent shows, and school pageants, a historical landmark in its own right. But something new was happening this weekend. A children's performance, part of a traveling, interactive theater tour for underprivileged youth. The theme? Teddy's Big Secret Adventure, sponsored by a group Morgan had never heard of, Whispers and Wonders. "That's not a non-profit," Ramirez muttered, typing rapidly. "No tax ID, no EIN, no board members. It's fake." Morgan clenched his jaw. "And I'll bet you a week's pay this theater isn't just a stage, it's a trap." Hunter growled softly at the word. The next 48 hours were a blur of logistics, risk assessments, and failed leads. The FBI offered assistance but lacked enough jurisdiction to go all in. The state police helped coordinate security for the upcoming event without tipping off parents or the press. Morgan knew they couldn't shut the performance down without causing a panic, and that's exactly what the predator was counting on. So instead, they made a choice. Let the show go on, but rig it tight. Controlled entrances, plainclothes officers, K-9 units, facial recognition cams. It was a gamble, and Morgan hated every second of it. The morning of July 15th arrived hot and dry, the sky a pale blue, sun beating down without mercy. Parents arrived early, clutching snack bags and sunscreen. Dozens of kids lined up in front of the theater doors, buzzing with excitement. Morgan stood by the loading dock and back, headset in one ear, badge tucked beneath his plain jacket. Hunter stood beside him, already sniffing at every crate, curtain, and costume bag that came in. "Any sign of him?" Morgan asked through the mic. "Nothing on cams," Ramirez replied. "Lots of clowns, volunteers, 2 actual teddy bear mascots. But nobody matching the composite. We're watching everyone." Morgan didn't like it. It felt too clean, too easy. That's when Hunter barked. He had stopped at a supply crate marked puppets and props. Morgan knelt beside him and pried it open. Inside, costumes, foam heads, oversized gloves. And buried at the bottom, a small hard-shell case. Morgan opened it. Inside, 6 brand new teddy bears, identical to the others, each with a pinhole lens between the eyes. And tucked into the corner, a handwritten note. "It's showtime." Morgan's earpiece crackled. "We've got movement. Stage left entrance. One of the teddy bear mascots just cut into the staff hallway." Morgan stood fast. "Do not engage. I'm going in." Hunter growled and bolted ahead. The theater's backstage hallway was dim and narrow, lined with faded posters of community musicals and dusty award plaques. Hunter ran silent, nose low. Then he stopped at a door marked Green Room. Morgan opened it slowly. The room was empty, but on the table sat an old wooden puppet. Brown fur, red stitched mouth, black button eyes. And in its lap, a tablet playing a video on loop. Morgan stepped closer and pressed play. The screen showed live footage from inside the auditorium. Children in the front rows, parents chatting, lights beginning to dim. Then the camera shifted slightly and landed on a little girl in a pink hoodie sitting alone. She looked around nervously, then up at the camera and waved. Morgan's stomach flipped. He radioed in, "Check row C, third seat in, pink hoodie, alone." "Copy," Ramirez said. A moment later, "She's gone. Just now, security didn't see her leave." Morgan's voice dropped. "Lock the exits, now." He grabbed the tablet and turned to Hunter. "Find her." What happened next was a blur. Hunter led Morgan down the back hallways, through a side corridor rarely used by the public. It twisted behind the orchestra pit and toward the old basement storage area, technically off limits. Morgan kicked open the door, and there she was. The girl in pink, standing beside a man in a dusty gray hoodie and face paint, half clown, half bear. The puppet in his hand spoke with a mechanical voice. "You found us." Morgan raised his weapon. "Step away from her, now." The man turned slowly, smiled, and said, "It's not about taking them, it's about waking them." Hunter snarled. The man reached toward the girl. Hunter leapt. The girl screamed. Morgan fired. The puppet fell. But the man was already gone, vanished through a service hatch, leaving behind a trail of red cloth and a laughing echo. The girl was safe. Shaken, but safe. She clung to Hunter like a lifeline, sobbing into his fur as the rest of the team stormed in. Morgan dropped to one knee, gently touching her shoulder. "You're okay now. You're safe." Through tears, she whispered, "The bear said he had more friends in the dark." Morgan met Ramirez's eyes. This wasn't over. Not even close. Later that night, back at the station, Morgan stood in front of the evidence board. Photos of bears, maps, symbols, theater flyers, Polaroids. And now the girl's drawing given to him on her way out. It showed a man in a bear mask standing beside a puppet theater. Behind it, a group of children, all with buttons for eyes. And written at the top in crayon, "The place where lost kids go." Morgan turned to Hunter. "We have to find it." Hunter barked once, then walked to the corner of the room, where another note had just been slipped under the door. Morgan picked it up. One sentence. "The stage is set. The curtain falls soon." It started with a dog's bark. Now it ended beneath the earth. Beneath the lies. Beneath the theater, the carnival, the nursery. All of it led here. Officer Morgan Chase stood at the mouth of a narrow tunnel just beyond the edge of Elk River. The old water plant, long condemned, sat half hidden behind rusted fencing and overgrown brush. A steel hatch lay open at his feet, its hinges covered in fresh fingerprints. Next to him, Hunter growled, his body tense. They had finally found the entrance. The place the little girl had drawn. The place the voice recordings hinted at. The place where lost kids go. It hadn't come easy. After the incident at the theater, Morgan and Deputy Ramirez had tracked the van seen leaving the area, traced it to an abandoned barn outside of Elk River. Inside, they found costumes, voice changers, teddy bear molds, and a collection of names carved into the wooden walls. First names only. Children, some missing for months, some for years. But that wasn't the worst part. They also found a blueprint, crude, sketched in charcoal, of a facility hidden underground. A bunker, not a real one, but a twisted version of safety. A maze built beneath the old Elk River water plant, long disconnected from the grid. A place no one monitored, no one patrolled. And at the center of that maze, a room labeled in red ink, "Story Time." Morgan clicked his flashlight on and moved slowly down the damp tunnel. Hunter followed, his paws silent on the stone floor. The air grew colder with every step. Mold clung to the walls. Water dripped from overhead pipes. It smelled like old childhood memories. Damp wool, wet plastic, forgotten basements. They passed faded murals of teddy bears and rainbows, peeling from the concrete walls. Someone had tried to make it look inviting, safe, comforting. It only made it worse. At the first junction, Church Junction, they found it. A small toy box with a laminated sign taped to it. "Take a bear before entering. Bears keep the stories away." Morgan didn't touch it. Neither did Hunter. They pushed forward. At the second chamber, they found bunk beds, child-sized. 8 of them, made up with cartoon sheets and stuffed animals. Some toys had cameras embedded in them. Others had wires coiled inside like nerves. A line of children's shoes sat in a row by the wall, perfectly placed. Morgan paused. He whispered, "Dear God." Then Hunter growled again and barked. 3 sharp, echoing barks. Morgan turned fast, gun raised. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Not running this time, just watching. The same man, the same crooked smile, the same puppet on his hand. "Officer Chase," he said softly, "I was hoping it'd be you." "Step back," Morgan said, "hands where I can see them." The man didn't move, just lifted the puppet. "You still think this is about stealing children," he whispered. "But I don't take them. You hide them. I free them from a world that doesn't see them, that forgets them. You traumatize them, you destroy families." The man smiled wider. "No, I let them tell their stories. No more pretending, no more rules." Morgan stepped forward. "Where are the children?" The man tilted his head. "All around you." Morgan's blood ran cold. Then Hunter lunged. The man twisted, tried to run, but he wasn't fast enough. Hunter tackled him hard, slamming him to the concrete. Morgan pinned him, cuffed him fast, breath tight in his chest. But something still didn't feel right. The man laughed even while bleeding. "You think you've won?" Morgan pressed him against the wall. "Where are they?" The man looked up with hollow eyes. "They're in the room, but the real key, the real story, is what you're going to find inside it." They found the story time room 3 minutes later. A soundproof chamber with a single high chair, soft lighting, and walls covered in crayon drawings. Some happy, most terrifying. Figures with no faces, bears with bloody paws, children with stitched mouths, and in the far corner, a trap door covered in chalk stars. Morgan opened it. Below, in a second hidden chamber, they found them, 6 children, alive, wrapped in blankets, sedated, scared. Morgan dropped to his knees, radioing for backup. His voice broke halfway through. One of the children opened her eyes. "Are you the man with the dog?" she whispered. Morgan choked back tears. "Yeah, that's us." Hunter walked over, lay down beside her gently, and rested his head on her lap. The little girl cried softly into his fur. The rest of the night moved in blurs. Rescue teams, child services, medical staff, federal agents. The press never got close. And maybe that was a blessing. The man, whose real name was Richard Ellis, a disgraced child psychologist with a sealed record and decades of fake identities, was taken into custody under maximum security. He didn't speak again. Not a word. Not a confession. Not a regret. Only that smile. That damn smile. A week later, the children were reunited with their families. Most didn't remember much. Some called it a dream. Others, a story. But all of them remembered Hunter. Morgan stood outside the Elk River police station with Ramirez beside him, a coffee in hand, and Hunter lying in the shade. "You know," she said, "most officers go their entire career without something like this, without stopping something truly evil." Morgan didn't answer right away. He watched as a group of kids drew with sidewalk chalk nearby, giggling, arguing over colors, swapping stories. "I didn't stop it," he said finally. "Hunter did." Ramirez smiled. "Then maybe he deserves a promotion." Morgan looked down at his partner, scratched his ears. He doesn't want a promotion. He paused. He just wants kids to be safe. That night, Morgan walked into his living room and found something taped to the inside of his front door. A child's drawing. It showed a dog, a big dog, with a gold badge on his collar, standing in front of a group of smiling children, teeth bared, guarding them. At the top it read, in messy handwriting, "Hunter, my favorite hero. Thank you so much for following this story to the very end. From one bark in a nursery to the rescue of 6 children, Hunter's instincts never failed. Now it's your turn. What would you have done if your dog started barking at a pile of teddy bears? Would you have listened or walked away? Tell us in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of canine heroes, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story.